Hey, this is Eddie Hale, and this week in my Adobe Illustrator class, we're going to explore the Adobe Illustrator Type Create Outlines function. It allows you to turn type into paths that can be manipulated like any other path. Alright, first we need some type. I like to start with a big bold font. I'm going to change it to Futura BT Extra Black, and make it much bigger. Alright, the first thing you do is you take one of the selection arrows and select your type and go to type. No, wait, don't do it yet. First, what you do is option drag the type. And I'll try to sell you on why that's a good idea in just a couple of minutes. Now, take this type up here and go to type, create outlines. And now your type is reshapeable type. I can grab anchor points and move them around like this. Now, why did we option drag that type before? Well, this type is no longer type. I can't highlight it and make changes if I have a typo. It's nice to have this type down here that is still real type. If you had a typo, you could select this type and change it. Another reason to keep the real type around is next year, if your boss says, I really like that logo and the company wants one similar, can you make another one? You can open up this document and you'll have some type here that will tell you what font you started with. There's no font associated with this outline type up here anymore. Let's play around with reshaping this type. First of all, you have to use the white selection arrow to reshape this type, and you can use any other of the reshaping tools you know how to use, all the pen tool options. So I can add anchor points. I can move those anchor points around. I can take corner points and convert them to curve points. I can take the convert point tool and break direction handles. I can pull direction handles out where there were none before. I can delete anchor points, like that one right there. So any of the path reshaping skills that you have so far, you can employ on this type that has been converted to outlines. Things you should know about type that has been converted to outlines. First of all, the letters are grouped. If I grab this letter with the black selection arrow, I'm going to select all the letters because they're all a group. If you want to move just one, you could grab it with the direct selection arrow, and that letter will move independent of the group. But otherwise, the group will move as one. Another thing that's interesting is that each letter is a compound path. Notice when I move this I that both pieces of the I move. The compound path allows Illustrator to treat two shapes as if they are one, like the dot and the stem of this I. Also, this O, it's made up of two shapes too. The inner part of the O and the outer part of the O act as one shape. Compound paths also allow shapes to be hollow. This O is see-through. We'll learn more about that next time. Another neat thing about creating outlines in type is it helps when you send your work to commercial printing. Let's say your best friend asks you to design a t-shirt for his new podcast. You design this beautiful t-shirt and then you send it to the printer, and the t-shirt printer calls you up in a day or so and says, we don't have the font you used for that super cool t-shirt design you sent us. Can you send us the artwork again with the type converted to outlines? And you say sure. So the first thing you do is you go to File, Save, or Command S because you don't want to lose this design. And then you go to File, Save As, and you change the name to something like Outlines, T-shirt Design Outlines. And then you select all this type and you go to Type Create Outlines, or Shift Command O. Now when you send this back to the t-shirt printer, they won't need the font because it's just artwork. There's no type in this document. One disclaimer, it's not recommended that you convert very small type to outlines because it gets sort of chunky. But then again, you shouldn't be making body copy in Adobe Illustrator. That's an Adobe InDesign thing. Alright, one of the things you have to do in this week's lesson is you have to put multiple strokes on an item. Let's talk about strokes on type. I'm going to add a stroke to this type. And I'm going to make it very thick. Now, this is not good. Look at how the stroke presses in on the shapes of the letters here. These letters are less readable because of the stroke. Before the G looked like a G, now it looks less like a G because the stroke is pressing in on the black shape. What I need to do is move this stroke behind the type, and there's a way to do that. It's in the Appearance panel. I'm going to click on this piece of artwork. Now I have to confess, I have to relearn this every time I do it. But if I double click on one of these, I'm going to see the stroke and the fill in separate pieces. I'm going to double click on Contents. Yes, it was Contents. Here's my stroke, here's my fill. Watch this, I can grab the stroke and pull it down below the fill. Now the stroke is behind the fill. If the letter was readable before, it's going to be readable now because it still retains its black shape. In the Appearances panel, you can change the way that stroke looks too. I can change its color if I want to, and I can change its width. There's another neat thing you can do. I can add another stroke. I'm going to click New Stroke button. It adds one here. I'm going to change the color, and I'm going to change the width and make it wider, and you'll see that stroke peeking out from behind the red one I just made. And I can add more. I can keep stacking them up. Make it a little wider, and it peeks out too. Isn't that fun? And all the while, the type should remain readable. So there, you've learned a lot of stuff. You've learned that before you create outlines, you option drag a copy of the type. You've learned that you click on the type with an arrow tool, and then you can go to Type, Create Outlines. You've learned that you can reshape the letters with the direct selection arrow. You've learned that the type is grouped when it's converted to outlines, and you've learned that each letter is a compound path. You also learned how to create multiple outlines in the Appearances panel. That's pretty neat. Now come to class ready to do really fun things with type converted to outlines. Thanks. Bye.